Happy New Year, Catalyst! Do you do New Year's resolutions? Wait, before you leave, neither do I. I'm not one for New Year's resolutions, but I am a sucker for a good rebrand. And in this episode, we're going to break down my ebook, The Year in Review and Rebrand Guide, because I do believe it's important no matter where you're at in your stage of life. Maybe you're a medical student, resident. Maybe you're a working physician mom of 3 and you're just needing some kind of creativity and a rebrand, some kind of focus. There's something to be said about doing that self-excavation, that inner work. And of course, I like to make it fun. So I'm going to go through my ebook and you can get a piece of paper and a pen and you can write down these amazing, insightful answers. Or at the end of this episode, I'll give you the link where you can actually print out the colorful ebook. So join me. Let's do a rebrand on your work-life masterpiece. Hi, I'm Dr. Laura Salyer, and I help overworked doctor moms find their inner spark and light. I believe in a world where women physicians can flourish inside and outside the exam room by redefining the practice of medicine as a self-expression of the healing arts. If you're ready to step into your highest creative power, join me. This channel is for you. Hit subscribe, and together we'll color outside the lines of your work-life masterpiece. Okay, let's dig in with a story, as always. So I am filming this podcast episode kind of off the cuff. I find that this is a new way that I get into flow. Sometimes I'll have notes in front of me, and sometimes I just like to talk as if we are both holding our own cups of tea across the aisle, having a good conversation. That is where the best transformation happens among friends and colleagues. And dare I say, an antiquated version of the doctor's lounge, which is ever disappearing. We don't have doctor's lounges anymore. And now more than ever, I'm feeling called forth to help the community of physicians that are women. We undergo undue stress, unequal burden, emotional labor. A lot of burnout metrics aren't even capturing the atrocities that happen as a women healer. When you're a woman, you tend to shoulder a lot of these burdens, and the community isn't quite there. There isn't structure for that. Often you're isolated in your own office and you're really trying to just get through your day. So this episode is for you if you're feeling a little lost, a little kind of wandering around and forgetting who you are inside. Let's have our cup of tea together and let's dive in. The story that I want to begin this with is one of feeling despondent. And we've all had that happen. I remember being in family practice and closing my office door and just sitting down at my desk and feeling like I didn't know where I was headed. I mean, sure, I knew I had an afternoon left of patients to see, but really, where was I headed in life? I felt like I'd checked all the boxes, family, kids, had a career. It was helping patients, but really, I felt like I also was hiding. I wanted to go back and just be a hermit after the long day talking to people. And I know a lot of physicians feel the same because it can be exhausting when you're interacting with the public. I mean, anybody who's worked in public relations knows that, whether you're a waiter at a restaurant or a, hotel staff, the public can have a certain kind of energy expenditure. And in this day, I remember it was springtime and the birds were chirping outside, the sun was outside, but I still felt stuck. Like I couldn't dare go outside and take a walk. I had to get on top of my charts. I had to be as productive as I could because soon it would be 4:30 or 5 and I had to pick up my kids from daycare. It was this constant pressure of moving forward, this constant feeling in my throat that I wasn't doing it all. I wasn't even doing it half. I was not only failing as a mom, failing as a doctor, failing as a person in society. It felt like all across the way, this was set up for failure. Now, what I know now is I was really stuck in a lot of limiting beliefs and thought distortions, and also just hadn't really done that work to sift through some of those thoughts and reclaim my inner creativity, that powerful flow neuroscience that can literally be the antidote to burnout. And so now I'm putting all this together in workshops, in CME courses, and teaching these across the world to retreats, to women who are yearning for that kind of rekindling of magic. We went into a career told that we are going to affect patient lives and help heal them. And instead, we find ourselves acting like robots and being responsible for everybody's needs, and we forget our own. So, in true fashion of doing this off the cuff, I'm going to pull up my little ebook that I worked on for this year. And it's designed as a PDF that's fillable. So you can actually have this and then use it over and over again each year. The first thing I like to do, and I've done this 3 years in a row, is find a single word for the year, right? I know it sounds reductionistic, but it is really to focus. It helps you make the best decisions when you have a word that you're really using as your beacon, your North Star. You're aiming this compass at this single word. Last year for 2024, my word was simplify. And I did. I simplified a lot of things. I took off one revenue stream. I didn't know I was going to be simplifying my family structure, but I did simplify my family structure. And I'm learning to simplify my housing, simplify my materialistic goods, or simplify my travel. And so all last year, I was really kind of pointing towards this simplification of where do I spend my time? This year, I am bringing forth magnetic joy. I know it's cheating. It's not one word, it's two. But I would invite you to think, what would be your 1 or 2 word mantra for this year? And for me, magnetic joy means that everything I do, I want it to feel really magnetic. Whether I am magnetized to the joy and I'm pulled forward towards an activity or person, a situation, a conference that really kindles that joy in me, or that I bring that joy into the room and I trust that the right people, the right patients, the right clients are going to wake up and see that this is exactly what they need at exactly the right time. So if you're listening to this or watching on YouTube, press the pause button. Write down what words bubble up into your mind and trust yourself, the very first thing. And if that doesn't feel right, write the second or third thing that comes up and let it marinate for a couple days. You'll settle on your favorite words and it will make a huge difference in this year coming forward. Okay, now when you reflect back over last year, what was that year? It was the year that you did what, right? 2024 was the year that I ... right? What did you do? Complete that sentence right now in your mind. If you're driving your kids, you're doing mover duty right now, and you're about ready to drop one off at soccer and one off at a middle school dance, think in your head, this year was the year that and you know the answer, right? Did you reach out? Did you establish a new community of friends? Did you boldly ask to go down on your hours or say no to an extra shift? Did you get creative and start a new intramural sport or hobby? Did you finally conquer that uncomfortable conversation you had to have with a friend and you set a new boundary? You've done a lot of stuff in this year, but what bubbles up as something that you feel it stands out for this last year? And then along that same line, think of your top 3 favorite memories. That says a lot about what you're looking to call in for this year and what lights you up. We all joined a career in medicine because for me, I think I could speak for a lot of us. We knew it was a forever job. You always have a job. Physicians are always needed. And I always thought that as soon as I get to a certain comfort level of knowledge and wisdom and my own personal habits, I could then make it magical, make it personal for my patients, make it so it's a comfortable home for them. Because I was really just honored to learn from some amazing mentors and attending physicians in my residency back in Michigan. Shout out to Grand Rapids. Lots of amazing family doctors that had these things. They had a very fascinating and comfortable family-oriented clinic where pictures were on the walls, certain traditions were done with their staff members, and the patients felt like part of family. And they had their own little ways of doing things that just put that seal of approval of this personalization of their visit. And I'm curious whether that's still going on, because the way that healthcare has changed, it's so diluted now where you have to do a lot of things in a 10-minute visit. But I hold true that I bet if I were to visit these family doctors, I bet they're still clinging to that personal, creative way that they practice medicine. That's what I wanted to be. And so I feel like if you can connect with the reason that you went into medicine and combine it with a version of your favorite self in this last year, can you think of a time? Here's another question. When you felt like your favorite self in 2024, what were you doing? Were you dancing like crazy on top of a float in a parade? Were you knee deep in swamp water because you were leading a Boy Scout troop? Were you talking on stage to peers? Were you holding a group visit for grieving mothers? What were you doing in 2024 that you felt like, wow, I'm the favorite version of myself? How can you bring that deeply more present into your life? And it may not be in your work life, but it might be in your personal life. Because that's the beautiful part about life is it blends. There's no such thing as balance. It's a work-life masterpiece full of textures, colors, and layers that happen upon each other, edges that will overlap and sometimes abut one another. You don't have to choose. So if you are happy with where your career is right now, but you're feeling called to spend time somewhere else outside, guess what? That will be beneficial to a level of burnout or well-being that you have inside your job. Just listen to that call coming from inside the house. Now, in the flip side, what were your top 3 challenges of this last year? And think about why they were challenging. Was it that you were asked to do something outside of your comfort zone? And maybe it's a skill set you didn't want to improve. For some people, it could be something like, I was asked to give a presentation in front of a community group, and I just didn't really like it. It wasn't my thing. I didn't feel passionate about it. That's good to know. That will help inform you next time you get invited to do something similar. You might just decline it. But maybe your skill set of teaching in your local jujitsu class, it was easy for you because you love jujitsu, right? And you're just inherently talented at being able to explain those complex holds. So look at where those challenges were in your last year, top 3, and see what that informs you about what you really like to do, because we're all getting old here, right? If we're lucky, time marches on. And less should we be asked to do things we really don't like or doesn't light us up. That's a boundary that you're absolutely permitted to say. So when you had those top 3 challenges, what did you learn from those challenges? Did you learn that you prefer solo time or group time? Did you learn that you maybe stumbled upon a new interest you had no idea? Maybe astrology, right? You found yourself fascinated with the UAPs in the air that's being reported, the drones, whatever. All these wonderful things are unfolding for us to make this journey interesting. You don't have to stay the same physician or nurse practitioner or PA that you were last year or the year before. You absolutely can color outside those lines and level up and create something new. Okay, so now as we're still looking backward at the last year, what that you can remember amplified your energy? What really lit you up, right? Things that you didn't even expect. Maybe you ate at a new restaurant and the way that the chef had constructed the ingredients was unlike something you'd ever tasted. And it piqued your curiosity. And you wondered how you could replicate that in your own kitchen, right? But think of these experiences that made you feel so energized. And that, again, is a calling, because the more you concentrate on that and you find gratitude, you will call more of that into your life and make your life way more colorful and interesting. On the flip side, what drained your energy, right? Think back to the challenges. And is there anything else that really drained your energy? Do you need to say yes to those same things in 2025? That is crucial. I think there's a lot of things we do out of obligation, but then it becomes habit. And caring for your community is beautiful. But we all serve in different ways, and you can't serve in all the ways. You can't volunteer for all the organizations. It's okay to say no this time around if they're asking to re-up your subscription or your participation in a certain organization. It's okay. We all have different talents and ways that we can serve. And you'd be better served being 100% excited about something than 50% excited here and 50% excited there. And that means that it's time to look at the commitments you hold. What is a commitment that you no longer believe in 2025? What have you learned in the last year? Maybe you've learned things that are hard to swallow. Maybe you've learned that things don't always end up the way you had hoped. And so you're learning ways to be adaptable and creative and nimble. And that's a wonderful, beautiful lesson, right? We believe in AFGOs here in the Catalyst way. AFGO, another effing growth opportunity, not a mistake, not a regret. It's an AFGO. So what were yours? And what has it taught you about certain commitments that you really no longer support in 2025? All right, let's get down to the last few questions, and then we're going to do some future focus. So in 2024, what was something that you didn't have time to accomplish? And I want you to reflect on that. Is it that you were so busy with all these other beautiful projects and people and events? Or is it that maybe that thing you didn't accomplish isn't as important as it was last year? Something I like to do to mark the passing of time is I send myself an email every year. And I write it on New Year's Eve, and I have it to be sent back to my inbox on New Year's Eve the next year. And I usually talk about myself, my family members, each of them, what had happened that year, but what I'm proud of, or what I was worried about, or what I think is going to happen in the next year. It's kind of a mental exercise to really touch and feel all of the relationships in my life and my own goals. And what I find interesting is as I read my email again the next year, I can reflect and go, wow, that kind of felt like a big deal at the time, but it really wasn't. And it's helped me learn how to discern better in what projects deserve my time or what people or events. Because sometimes if it falls off of the to-do list, it's meant to fall off the to-do list, right? And looking at skills that I haven't been able to use regularly that I really enjoy is also another way to craft a better, more colorful and adaptable future that fits me, that feels like me. So in the end of a year in review, you want to leave behind something. You want to flush it down, right? What would that thing be for you? As we're sitting here holding our tea, or maybe you're now folding laundry, or maybe you're walking the dog. What is something you want to leave behind in 2024? And I believe in, again, no regrets, no, hatred, but more of respect and honoring the lesson it gave you, respect and honoring the time you spent with that, and that it taught you something, but you're now leaving it behind. Maybe if you're a functional medicine practitioner and you're listening to this, maybe you're going to stop seeing a certain kind of patient demographic because you learned this year that you really enjoy taking care of patients that have PANS or PANDAS or mold or mycotoxin, and the hormonal patients are a little more of a stretch for your brain. So maybe you're going to leave that behind. Or maybe you are thinking right now in your head of a relationship, a friendship that you really only see each other through text, and really you haven't gotten together in a few months or maybe a couple years, and maybe it's okay to leave that behind and not feel so guilty. Even if you don't officially do anything like tell that person that you're leaving them behind, you can in your mind put it to rest. It's not something as a source of guilt or shame that you aren't routinely reaching out to this person anymore. And finally, you've thought of what this year has meant to you. What's your grand lesson from 2024? If you could go back and teach your 2023 self what you would learn, what would be that lesson that you learn in 2024? Did you know that burnout is the same brainwave pattern as grief under a functional MRI? This means that 63% of us in healthcare are showing up to work every day immersed in burnout and grief. No wonder we have brain fog and emotional exhaustion and depersonalization. We're on autopilot, just going through the motions. But the good news is there is an antidote. The opposite brainwave pattern is flow, the only time where your brain produces all 5 neurochemicals of happiness. And better yet, you can teach yourself to prime your brain for more flow in your work-life masterpiece. In my course, Catalyst Reclamation, I teach you my 3-step AHA method so you can practice finding more moments of flow. And when you do, you increase your happiness, your well-being, you lower your cortisol, and you flourish as the catalyst that you are transforming healthcare. So come color outside the lines with me and go to drlaurasalyer.com/shop and check out the 10-hour AMA approved CME course, Catalyst Reclamation, so that you can step into your highest creative power. Okay, now is a good time to pause. If you need to go grab a snack, because we're about to captivate your future with a sprinkle of magic and creativity and flow neuroscience. We're going to have you think ahead in how 2025 is going to go. And I love a good rebrand. This is not resolutions, although I'm a sucker for strategic planning. That's part of the AHA method that I use inside my workshops. We talk about creativity as the sixth vital sign. It's literally the antidote to burnout. It's flow neuroscience. So the more you use flow in your day, you feel more alive and you have higher rates of well-being. So there are strategies to planning your ideal catalyst day, your week, and your year. But right now we're talking about let's rebrand yourself. Let's assign yourself a new nickname. If you could assign yourself a fun new nickname in 2025, what would it be? I'll tell you one that came up to my mind right away, and I have no idea where it came from, was Shasta. Does anybody remember Shasta Cola? That was such a special thing. We couldn't even drink it as a kid. I think it was expensive or something. And I just remember Shasta. And that came to my mind. No idea. It must mark me as a Gen X 70s kid. But that was my sparkly nickname that came when I did this exercise for 2025. And so when you think of your rebranded self, for me, the Shasta with magnetic joy, right? I want you to describe yourself. What does this new rebranded person do every day? What are their habits? What is their descriptors? How would you describe this rebranded self if you could use some adjectives? What would you say? And I'm encouraging you to make this centering yourself, not others. So I hear a lot of my clients and my catalysts might say things like, well, this version of me would be really good with time management so I can, get my kids on time, and I'm saying yes to, I'm doing all these organizations and I'm seeing more patients. But what about for you? That's very other focused. I want you to focus on yourself. What would you be best described as? And what habits would serve you in this rebranded self? If this rebranded self had goals, what would that be? And they can also be kind of anti-goals. If you're in the era and season of your life where you're so oppositional and you're kind of avoiding goals because you're so burned out with goals, that's okay too. Maybe your rebranded self is I'm not making a goal this year. I'm just going to let my heart decide where I go every day. And I'm just going to trust in the flow. That's totally great. Put that down though. What kind of accomplishments do you want your rebranded self to feel proud of in a year? And then think of what these non-negotiable self-care habits would be. For me, I laugh because every app now has this ability for having a streak. And talk about pressure for somebody who's perfectionistic tendencies and is unwiring that type A brain patterns that I've known all too well. Such familiar grooves in my brain of, oh my gosh, I want to be that good student and let's keep the streak. Whether it's sending TikToks to your sister or your Duolingo streak or your Insight timer meditation streak or your Peloton streak. I feel like the modern version of exchanging cassette tapes nowadays has not even been the Spotify playlist, but how many streaks do you have and what are they? It started with the Snapchat streak that my kids were obsessed about years and years ago. And that is what we prioritize. And it's quite clever that our tech apps have gamified this, right? This kind of commitment to being perfect and keeping a streak. So I don't want this to be a perfectionist wrapped goal, but I'm curious, what would your rebranded self have as non-negotiable self-care habits? What would that be? Maybe you like to dip your toes in a lake every day. Maybe it's once a week. Maybe every day you lock yourself in your pantry of the kitchen and eat a bag of Cheetos just because it's a little bit of solace that you get from a mother-in-law that lives with you or kids that are around. Maybe for you, it is doodling on your notepad for 5 minutes right before your first patient at 1 o'clock. It's just mindless, but something you do. Think of your self-care habits and think about ones you've had in the past that felt good and they just somehow disappeared. You didn't make time for that massage every month. You forgot that you enjoyed playing a little bit of intramural soccer. Whatever it is, put that back in rotation in 2025. And if you're having trouble thinking about what this rebranded self is, it's kind of like parts work, right? Then I want you to think of somebody else that you really admire and think of those adjectives that describe them. That can help you kind of crack the nut of this resistance to self, of imagining yourself in this different way. Think of other people, whether it is a celebrity or a fictional person, a thought leader, a colleague, a family member, a friend, whoever you admire. What makes them admirable in your eyes? What do you really appreciate about their demeanors, their habits, or their personality? Write that down on your paper. And that might be a clue as to what you would like to weave into the tapestry of your personality, your story, and your work-life masterpiece. If you could think of all those interests and hobbies, what would you prioritize as your new rebranded self? Would you say, okay, Insight Timer is my top streak. I have to keep it. That's me. But Duolingo has kind of slid off. I think I maintained a couple months and then it's gone. And that's okay. But what is a priority for your new rebranded self that you want to step into? And how would you handle stressful challenges differently? That's a hard one, right? We tend to get pretty reptilian in our brain. And it's funny how triggers can happen and they're not even triggers. Like it can be the way somebody says a sentence and they may not have meant it any way, but it reminds you of like a stern uncle you may have had, or a past fight you had with a dear friend, right? Or maybe it's a whiff of a cologne or perfume and suddenly you're triggered into anger, resentment, guilt, sadness, whatever. Our bodies are so interesting that way. So how do you handle stress? It's 4 o'clock. You've got to pick up your kids at 4:10. You still have 3 patients. What are you going to do? Usually you'd be calling the daycare or the sitter and saying, I'm going to be late again, and you're feeling that stress in your body. I want you to conjure that up right now. We can all feel it. You can find some kind of scenario where you have felt out of control because the situation is out of control and your body is handling all this stress inside as if by doing that, it would somehow make it easier. So how would your rebranded self handle that situation? This is something my rebranded self would do that I never did in the past as a working mom of 3 in primary care is I would take a deep breath. I can't tell you how little I breathed. I would have used my door more often to close it and make it a standard practice so it didn't only happen when I was tearing up or having a really bad day, right? Boundaries only happened when I was really at my limit. I should have made that a standard practice. There's many ways I could have taken better care of myself, but okay, I know better now. And how can you take better care of your future rebranded self? Now think to a weekend in 2025. What would you like to be doing? Your rebranded self? What would Shasta be doing on a weekend in 2025? It's amazing the power of calling it out and defining it can make it happen. For me, it's a lot of play. I turned 50 last year, and so if you're following me on social media, instead of one big party, I'm doing 50 for 50, which is 50 small intentional events or activities or playtimes with people that I care about, or sometimes solo, but it's things that are intentionally planned that are self-expressive and creative. I've already got 7 logged, and a lot of them center around the same theme of playing with art and creativity and movement. And so on the weekends in 2025, I'm sure Shasta would be messy with her hands in paint or flinging her arms around as she's dancing or doing yoga or walking in nature. There's a lot of things and it can shift. You can have seasonality in it. So what does your rebranded self want to do? And if you're thinking about the end of the year, fast forward to New Year's in 2025, what would you feel most proud of accomplishing? If you could feel pride, right? You could feel satisfaction. You could feel this aliveness that you did it. And it doesn't mean big things like I actually did a TED Talk, or I published a book, or I ran a marathon, or no, we're talking just what would feel good? What accomplishment would feel so good to have already have happened at the end of 2025? And looking in the mirror, how would that feel? Imagine yourself looking in the mirror, being so proud and happy that you did this. And what kind of emotions would you like to be feeling abundantly, freely, and often? These are the things that, as we're trying to reprogram, rebrand ourselves, we begin with those feelings, emotional guideposts, right? These emotions, energy and motion, can work in reverse. You can feel accomplished even before the accomplishment happens. You can feel love even before the love happens. You can feel joy even before. And that's not in saying that there isn't going to be sadness and guilt, and there isn't going to be times of anger and despondency and hopelessness. Those are all there too. I mean, look at the world we live in. It's ripe for the picking. But we can choose to hold those in our whole environment with the joy and with the pride that you're doing the best you can, that you're working on yourself every day, that you're grateful for what you have, even if it isn't aligned with what you thought your career would be or your life. And it's not about suppressing or oppressing emotions, but welcoming them all in and putting them in the stew, in the cocktail, and choosing, just like you would in a bowl full of Lucky Charms when I was 6, I would only eat the marshmallows and I'd pick those out strategically with my spoon. You can do that with your emotions. You can see the fear and the sadness and the anger, and you can use that for great energy and action. And I encourage you to, in whatever way that serves you, but be careful that your whole bowl doesn't just become the grossness, that you still look for the joy and the light and choose those intentionally. And that might be just what you need for your rebrand. Looking at your emotions that you want to feel the most of and choosing events and people that bring you those emotions. And for me, it's magnetic joy. And I would love to hear what yours are. So please, if you're watching this or listening, drop a comment below. Find me on social media. Download my ebook here. And for special magic, it's priced at $11.11, just so you can grab it. And it'll help you organize your Catalyst day. It'll help you officially type out on this PDF your goals, your rebranded self, so that next year you can look back at it and you can use it again, but you have a record of how far you've come and how much you enjoy coloring outside the lines and using the 6 vital sign of creativity. So this concludes your year in review and your rebranded self. And thank you for coming on this journey. I can't wait to talk to you next. And I'd love to hear what you'd like to hear about, because as you can tell, I can probably talk a lot about this stuff, and I'm so passionate. And this year I have pivoted my business to only supporting women inside my Catalyst Studio mentorship. And I'm closing my practice to men and only supporting women in their perimenopausal years to help embrace aging with holistic wisdom and vitality. And so I'm making these changes to call in my own version of what I want to see next. And I'd love to hear what you would like to talk about and tell me what you are rebranding yourself as this year. Until next time, keep coloring outside the lines and practicing that 6 vital sign of creativity, and we'll see you later.